In traditional politics, in order to stabilize the country, I inevitably have to control many things. On the contrary, when there are many small states, there is actually much more freedom between them. That's why, if you look at Chinese history, the periods when thought and culture were most developed were during the spring and autumn, and warring states periods. Those were the times when the 100 schools of thought emerged. What happened after the warring states period? After the warring states, there was none of that anymore. There were no new ideas, no new schools of thought at all. Hello everyone, we're back again to talk about our Chinese metaphysics, specifically fate studies. In the Ming and Qing dynasties, the system of Zi Wei was developed. How exactly did it come about? I'll also take this opportunity to talk to everyone about the evolution of fate studies as a whole. As we often say, you need to understand the background behind something. Only then will you know what you're learning, what is fake, what is fabricated, and what is simply something people use to deceive you. That's why I especially emphasize that history is very important. If you can't understand history, then you won't know the reasons behind things for a very long time, probably up until my generation or maybe a few teachers who are willing to speak the truth. People have only just started to admit that actually, Zi Wei Doshu. A large part of it, in fact, is actually ancient Indian astrology, but people are unwilling to admit this. Why is that? Well, Chinese people really hope, or like to think, that everything was invented by themselves. It's just like with many of our musical instruments. Actually, they were introduced from Central Asia, but we call them national music, as if they are uniquely Chinese instruments. In reality, they came from Central Asia. For example, the Liu Qin, which we talked about in class, was introduced during the Tang dynasty. Indian astrology, because India was ruled by the Arabs, spread along with the expansion of the Arab Empire's territory and its border with the Tang dynasty. This led to trade exchanges and the sharing of technologies between the two sides. So because of this, it was introduced during the Tang dynasty. After it was introduced, people at the time realized, wow, this system is so precise and it's so useful. So at that time, a school of thought was formed called the Qin Tang School, Qin as in piano. The Tang in Qin Tang School refers to the imperial court, so it's called the Qin Tang School. Now, what did the Qin Tang School use? Of course, they adapted Indian astrology into Chinese culture, right? So it developed into a technique that is still used today, called 7 zheng 4 yu. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then zheng as in politics, and yu as in surplus from abundance every year. So what does 7 zheng refer to? 7 zheng refers to the 5 major planets in the sky. Along with the sun and moon, these are called the 7 zheng. At that time, people might not have thought about it, but among the 9 major planets, the first 5 are our 5 planets. Foreign cultures during their own cultural revolutions didn't look at the 5 elements, right? But the first 5 major ones, right? The first 5 are Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Venus, and Mercury. Actually, that's because we discovered these 5 planets very early on, so when we already had these names on our side, we just continued to use them. Then if you add the sun and moon, you get the 7 luminaries. So, the 7 luminaries and 4 remainders is what we now generally consider to be the true Eastern astrology, but in fact its background is actually Indian astrology. Of course, you could also say India is part of the East. Anyone who has studied the 7 luminary system or is currently using the 4 remainders method will know that it's almost the same as astrology. It requires looking at latitude and longitude and many other things. So, many people might ask, how could this be? After all, there are so many stories and historical records in ancient China. When it comes to astrology, these things are often brought up. For example, people would say that after seeing a shooting star, the emperor would soon pass away. This kind of thing existed as early as the pre-Qin era, even during the Zhou dynasty. Was it really like that? Of course, that's absolutely not the case. It's not like we never observed the stars at all. Some say it was only after the Arabs came that we started looking at the stars, but that's impossible. We must have been observing these things since ancient times. Moreover, as for Chen Wenlong and the concept of ethnicity, that's actually only something from the past 2,000 years or so. 2,000 years ago, we were actually semi-nomadic, half agricultural, and even more so during the Warring States period, for example in the state of Qin or in the state of Jin, and after the partition of Jin into the 3 states of Wei and Zhao, since they were all in the Hebei and Shandong regions, there was the so-called practice of wearing Hu-style clothing and learning horseback archery. Back then, in our history textbooks, we would talk about the so-called Hu people. They were nomadic peoples, so in that era, our ability to observe celestial phenomena was actually not necessarily inferior. It's just that once we transitioned into an agricultural society, our technology stopped advancing, so there was a limit to what we could achieve. So what happened later? The Arabs, for example, had even better techniques, so they made further progress. All technological advancements follow this pattern. For instance, the so-called Nongminli, the traditional Chinese farmer's calendar that we use today. Actually, up until the Ming Dynasty, we couldn't produce a perpetual calendar. By perpetual calendar, I mean a calendar system that follows certain rules, so that based on these rules you could theoretically lay out the calendar for 10,000 years. But even by the Ming Dynasty, we still couldn't produce it, simply because our mastery of it wasn't good enough. So the ancient Huangli, which refers to the Huang meaning emperor, not the Huang meaning yellow as we write it today, actually referred to the emperor's calendar in ancient times. So what about the Huang in emperor? The emperor would issue it once every year. Why did it have to be issued annually? Because the calculations weren't accurate enough. That's why the Imperial Astronomical Bureau had to make adjustments every year. When issuing the calendar, they would also announce things similar to what our government does now, like when public holidays are, when you should start farming, when to hold ceremonies to worship heaven, when to perform rituals, and what the state should be doing at certain times. These things had to be set in advance. It wasn't until the Ming Dynasty, when Western missionaries came to revise this system, that the perpetual calendar finally appeared. Even by the Ming Dynasty, we still couldn't create it ourselves. So after it was corrected, was everything fine? Not really. Now, thanks to observatories, we have satellites that can directly observe the Earth from above, so things are very accurate. There are basically no major issues anymore. But even after the German missionary corrected our calendar system, there were still flaws later on. What I want to tell everyone is that this system has always been continuously advancing and constantly refining its technology. During the Tang Dynasty, since we had already become an agricultural society, we stopped advancing and refining this technology. As a result, we fell behind the Arabs. When the Arabs introduced this technology to us, we realized, wow, you're really advanced. And when you see how advanced they are, of course someone will learn it, and after learning it, they localized it into Chinese. After it was localized into Chinese, it became known as Qizhen Siyu. Later on, this evolved into what we now call the study of date selection, which is its main foundation. The main basis of date selection is that for things like weddings, business openings, or moving, you have to look at the timing. This even includes what we see now in the Farmer's Almanac, or, well, which day is suitable for getting married, which day is good for moving, which day is not suitable for traveling, or which day is good for worship. All of these come from this Qizhen Siyu. After they organize it, they follow certain rules and then calculate accordingly. They would determine whether a particular day has any influence on certain things, and if so, then it wouldn't be suitable for certain activities. There is a set of formulas for this, and they calculate accordingly. Nowadays, some people still use this method. In fact, during the Tang Dynasty, we adopted this Indian astrology and localized it into Chinese, then used it to refine our own astrology, making it more conceptual, better, and more detailed. So it's not that we didn't have astrology before the Tang Dynasty, but rather that the Arabs developed Indian astrology, then Apollo made modifications, and then we further adapted it. And as a result, its system became even better. Nowadays, we all think that this is our own astrology, but in reality, it's actually Indian astrology. If you study both Indian astrology and the 7 proofs and 4 sayings, you'll find that it's basically the Chinese version. It's extremely similar. Oh, even the way they cast charts uses a central point, you know. It's really similar. So now we have to talk about how it combined Indian astrology with the I Ching. When we talk about the Tang Dynasty, if you have even a little bit of background knowledge, you'll know that. During the Tang Dynasty, there were 3 large-scale persecutions of Buddhism. The emperors of the Tang Dynasty had the surname Li, and the founder revered by Taoism was also surnamed Li Laozi. So, for the sake of political rule, the Tang Dynasty supported Taoism. They wanted people to believe that the emperor was a descendant of Laozi, you see. Oh, that's how emperors were. They would claim the divine right of kings, and in doing so, they could elevate their own status. So, correspondingly, they would suppress Buddhism. Not to mention, back then, there were campaigns to eradicate Buddhism and suppress Buddhist activities. Actually, it also included the fact that Buddhism had a lot of, well, because of the system at the time, many Buddhist temples didn't have to pay taxes, since followers would make donations. So they occupied large areas of mountains and forests, and they had many temples, which meant they had a lot of money. They could even maintain their own private armies. So, for example, why did Shaolin Temple have the 5 elders? This kind of thing also happened in Japan. They had their own private armies as well. So in Japan, there were also incidents like the one involving Shinzo, where there was an attempt to eradicate Buddhism, and this was the reason why. In fact, it wasn't because he disliked that religion, but rather because the political power of those temples had grown so large that it could destabilize the country. That's why he took action against them. Now, are we talking about astrology techniques here? Well, because of Buddhism, these were brought into the Tang dynasty. Just think about it. Because the anti-Buddhist campaigns would affect these monks, what do you think they would do? They needed somewhere to go, somewhere to rely on, somewhere to earn a living. Anyway, once they took off their kasaya and put on a Taoist robe to cover their shaved heads, they pretty much looked the same. Plus, Taoism talks about emptiness, and so does Buddhism, about all sentient beings, not being too attached, letting go of everything, and Taoism also talks about emptiness. In fact, they're quite similar, so what does that mean? As soon as they changed their clothes and studied a couple more Taoist scriptures, they could start heading down the path of Taoism, moving towards Taoist temples. But then why would the Taoist temples accept them? You have to offer something, if not money, then some kind of effort, or at least contribute something. Okay, let's not make it sound so mercenary or paint it in such a realistic light. When you stay at someone else's place, people will naturally chat. During these conversations, you'll end up sharing some of what you know. As you exchange ideas, you'll start to realize, oh, so that's how you do it. Of course, they might not realize that traditionally, the I Ching or other things, like military strategies that originated from ancient warfare, are involved. And as for these military strategies, when there was no war going on, or in situations where in reality, not that many people needed military advisors, they gradually transformed into what we now call feng shui, or things like Qimen Dunjia. When people who practiced Sanxing and those who were familiar with the I Ching interacted with each other, do you think they would want to? Of course, they would hope to take the strengths of the other side and use them to improve their own weaknesses. That's always how technological progress works. So, in this process, as everyone interacted and exchanged ideas, they gradually began to realize, oh, you have your areas of strength that I can learn from, and I have areas where you can learn from me as well. So, gradually, that's how people taught each other. And after the Tang dynasty, well, as everyone knows, after the Tang dynasty, there was the division of power among the regional warlords, and eventually the entire Tang dynasty was carved up by nomadic peoples. In the midst of all this chaos, in such a turbulent situation, the more chaotic the times, the more cultural exchange there is. Why? Because under traditional political systems, in order to stabilize the country, I would inevitably control many things. But when there are many small states, there is actually much more freedom between them. So if you look at all of China's philosophical and cultural developments, the most flourishing period was during the Spring and Autumn and Warring States eras. That was when the 100 schools of thought emerged. But after the Warring States period, these things disappeared. There were no new ideas, no new philosophies at all. In Europe, because there were also dozens of small countries, they constantly collided and interacted with each other in all sorts of ways. Similarly, after the Tang dynasty, during that period, there were various small states with Han Chinese, as well as nomadic peoples and small countries. In order to survive, everyone would do business and communicate with each other and so on and so forth. The regimes or emperors of that era also had to do these things in order to survive. They would be even more eager to find many extraordinary and talented people to seek out those with abilities. So, after all that extensive interaction in that era, in the field of fate studies, many different methods and advancements began to emerge, along with various systems, different kinds of systems, and as everyone knows, by the time of the Song dynasty, the founding emperor of the Song dynasty had a national advisor, a strategist named Chen Tuan. He is the person whom we now generally believe to be the author of Zi Wei Astrology. This person was called Chen Tuan, also known as Chen Xi, and everyone believes he was the one who wrote it. But in fact, this person was a famous figure in Taoism, and his life goal was to refine elixirs and achieve immortality by consuming them. If I'm already planning to become immortal, why would I bother with fortune telling? Nowadays everyone says that Zi Wei Astrology was written by him, but in reality it wasn't him. But we can also see that, actually during the Song dynasty, this whole system had already started to emerge. At that time, it took shape, with some branches leaning more towards astrology, focusing specifically on the stars, while others made greater use of the I Ching, forming systems that specialized in discussing the palaces. Then, during the Song dynasty, it was also influenced by the Mongols. This conquest by the Mongols once again led to a period of upheaval and displacement. In the midst of all this, there was also an interlude. When we look at the temples south of the Yangtze River and those north of the Yangtze in China, they look different. This was an era of great integration, and the temples south of the Yangtze. You'll notice that inside these temples, they often worship both Buddhist deities, for example Shakyamuni, and Taoist gods, such as the three pure ones, Laozi, and so on. So what else do they worship? They also worship Confucius and deities from Confucianism. Therefore, in temples south of the Yangtze River, what they worship is called the combination of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. These three traditions are merged together. Why is it like this? Actually, it's because the wealthy people in the north, who were considered intellectuals, followed Confucianism. When they migrated south, they brought with them their Buddhist or Taoist beliefs, which then merged with the local southern folk practices and shamanism. You'll notice that only the temples south of the Yangtze River are like this. North of the Yangtze, for example, at Jing'an Temple in Shanghai, you won't see these things looking the same because they didn't go through this process of integration. Anyway, in this great process of fusion, it also included people from the Yuan dynasty. People from the Jin dynasty or the Liao dynasty also made modifications to these things. For example, during this process of evolution, there was a transitional period between the official system and what is called Dushu. There's a book called Yelu Jin. What is Yelu? Yelu was the imperial surname of the nomadic peoples at that time, the surname of their emperors. So you can see that in the midst of all this, there was a long process of integration, and this continued all the way until the Ming dynasty. Of course, by the Ming dynasty, the integration was more or less complete. The emperors of the Ming dynasty realized, hey, I want to have a system that is well organized and institutionalized. He wanted to train this group of fate masters, these prediction experts. Actually, it's similar to what we have now. Our country also has think tanks and advisory groups. They analyze a lot of data and then inform you about the upcoming situation. So back then, these people were essentially the emperor's think tank. They observed society, used the foundations of fate studies, and analyzed things for the emperor. They would tell him what to pay attention to, what to be concerned about, and who should inherit what matters. Your general will not betray you. He would use this kind of analysis. In fact, we'll talk more about this in the next episode, about how fate studies, when it reached modern times, was turned into a tool for scamming people out of money, for pretending to be mystical, and for putting on a show. They did a lot of bad things with it, but back then it actually wasn't like that. At that time, it was actually very simple. Just like doctors, their purpose was to help people. Even emperors needed these people, so they needed a group dedicated to this work. And this group had to receive the same education within the same system so they could review each other's work, whether what you said was correct or whether what I said was wrong. If my method was different from yours, so wouldn't it be very difficult for the emperor to tell who's right? That's why, during the Ming dynasty, the emperor began to use the power of the royal family to bring all of this together. Well, if we want to integrate all of this, the first thing we have to do is find someone to take charge. The most advanced system, and then incorporate everything else into it. There has to be a main system. It's just like how nowadays all athletes have to train their muscles, and every athlete knows how to stretch their tendons, how to improve their physical fitness or cardiovascular endurance, and so on. They adjust these things very well, so this is the foundation. On top of this foundation, we can then talk about whether you want to specialize in swimming or focus on another area. But no matter what sport you do, when it comes to endurance, of course, your breathing capacity, the oxygen content in your blood, and your muscle percentage, all of these things are equally important. So, the emperors of the Ming dynasty did the same thing. They sought out the most powerful system. At that time, everyone believed that this system, which had already been developed to a very advanced level, was the best. Back then it was called Taiyi Jingjin, Taiyi. Taiyi actually refers to Zi Wei Jingjin, Jin as in the color gold. The Jin here actually refers to the 9-square grid used when applying the I Ching, which looks like a well. So this is Taiyi Jingjin. It was also developed within this system called Shu Tianji, Shu as in mathematics, Tian as in heaven, and Ji as in machine. So what does Shu Tianji mean? It means using a very scientific mathematical method to decipher the messages that heaven wants to give you, which are called Tianji, or heavenly secrets. It's called Shu Tianji. So these two systems during the Ming dynasty were already considered to be very well developed and excellent. They integrated them, and the royal family used this to cultivate their think tank, which is what we now refer to as the Imperial Astronomical Bureau, or Qin Tianjian. They trained their think tank this way, so that's how it was accomplished. That's why there are still some myths and legends in fate studies, such as the story that the Yongle emperor of the Ming dynasty, because of a Taoist priest from Mount Hua. So, after having his fortune told and learning that he would become emperor, the emperor realized this secret. He then imprisoned the Taoist priest in the palace and ordered him to write down the secret method. Of course, when you hear this, you know it's definitely a folk legend. In reality, it was probably that the Ming emperor discovered that such techniques existed among the people, and he needed to systematically cultivate his own trusted people. So, he systematized this method and used it as the main teaching for his so-called Imperial Astronomical Bureau, which was essentially his think tank, equivalent to Zi Wei Astrology. It began to be implemented and refined. So at that time, as we just mentioned, it was a combination of the 7 governors and 4 remainders with the I Ching. Therefore, during the Ming dynasty, especially before the mid-Ming period, which is about 500 years ago, the Zi Wei Astrology chart was actually still circular. Alright, even now you can still find apps that use this circular Zi Wei Astrology chart, which is still in a circular form because at that time it hadn't completely transformed yet. However, it was already known that it could be combined with the I Ching, but it remained circular all the way until after the mid-Ming dynasty. It was only then that it changed into this, a square-shaped chart with 12 palaces. It basically transformed the original 9 palaces of the I Ching into 12 palaces, adding 4 more palaces, and that's how it became the Zi Wei Astrology chart we see today. During that process, it also abandoned certain elements. Astrology requires calculating latitude and longitude, and it addresses the issue in the I Ching, where you often need talent or intuition. Sometimes if my sixth sense isn't good, my interpretations are strange. But astrology doesn't require a sixth sense. When the sun moves into a certain sign, it has a definite meaning. You can't make things up. Alright, so these were things that people were already doing among the general public, but the royal family took it a step further and systematized it. Because among the people, exchanges often happened like this. I might originally study astrology, then go learn the I Ching from someone in Taoism, or a Taoist might go study with a certain astrology teacher. Everything was scattered like that, bits and pieces here and there. Depending on each person's aptitude, maybe I learned well, but someone else didn't, and everyone had their own perspectives. So they gathered everyone together to organize all of this, to put it all in order collectively, and after they organized it together, it became very systematic and complete, and they removed anything that was incorrect or inappropriate. By the middle of the Ming dynasty, as for Zidushuang, you can't really call it a prototype, because it was already quite complete and very well developed. It was already extremely practical and useful, having been thoroughly organized. Then, all the way until the mid-Qing dynasty, the complete book of left and right trends that we see now was actually written by people from the Qing dynasty. From the mid-Ming to the mid-Qing, there was another gap of about 200 or 300 years, and at that time the emperor felt that it was no longer sufficient. So he began to incorporate more techniques like Qimendunjia and other folk methods from rural areas, systematically bringing them in one by one, turning Zi Wei Astrology into a very complete system of fate calculation. So, to put it simply, by the time of the Qing dynasty, because of the emperor's needs, after you finish calculating the emperor's fate, you would then need to find solutions, right? So they incorporated Qimendunjia, Feng Shui formations, and all these other methods. Everything was brought in. By the mid-Qing dynasty, because of the needs of the royal family, it became an extremely vast system. It became an almost all-powerful system of fate calculation, because with Zi Wei Astrology, it integrated all the fate calculation systems we know. I've described it like this before. What is it like? It's like mixed martial arts. Just like the MMA we know today, what does it use? It uses requirements for physical fitness, as well as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, Karate, and boxing. It combines several of the world's most important martial arts techniques and integrates them into one system, making it extremely comprehensive. It's very well developed, so of course this leads to a situation. Maybe I come from a Taekwondo background, or maybe I come from a Muay Thai background, so my kicking skills might be especially strong, or I'm particularly good at striking. But then I might not be as skilled in joint locks, or I might not be good at taking people down to the ground. Or if I come from a judo background, then I might be especially good at joint locks and throwing people to the ground, but maybe my striking isn't as strong. I might not be very good at striking because of these kinds of differences. Of course, each teacher has different knowledge, and they will integrate what they know. Later on, as it spreads among the general public, all sorts of diverse schools and styles emerge. This actually happens because the teacher passing it on wasn't able to learn the entire system comprehensively, and that's quite normal, because back then, the system was so vast that, under normal circumstances, unless you were someone specially trained within the royal family, it would be very difficult for you to master the entire system, so of course there would be some gaps in your knowledge. This is what happened after the Qing dynasty, and the developments that followed. In the next episode, we'll talk about how, in fact, all the schools and styles we know today only appeared after the mid-Qing dynasty. There weren't even any in the mid-Qing. Most only emerged towards the end of the Qing dynasty. We'll discuss in the next chapter how these things only really took shape in the early years of the Republic of China after the fall of the Qing dynasty, how they developed into such a wide variety as we see today, and also why, before 1960, except for Taiwan, no one else practiced Zi Wei Doshu before then. What was the reason behind this? Clearly, this is such a powerful system, so why was it only known in Taiwan? And why has it gradually started to spread back to Chinese communities everywhere? What are the reasons behind this phenomenon? What kind of story does it have? That's actually a fascinating story, and we'll share it with everyone during that part. Also, why did so many different schools and traditions emerge? And finally, why did it take the shape it has today? The way it is today, and also one of the most important techniques within Zi Wei Doshu, actually originated in Taiwan. It was developed by the early fortune tellers in Taiwan. Nowadays, people often say it was passed down by the goddess Nuwa, but that's actually not the case. In reality, it was jointly developed by top fortune tellers in Taiwan. This is a very, very interesting fact. It's a very interesting thing. Also, before World War II, fortune telling wasn't very popular in Taiwan because at that time it was under Japanese rule. The Japanese themselves practiced I Ching and Hakushin, and their fortune telling wasn't as complex. If everyone is interested, we can keep talking about this. For this series, we plan to spend about 4 or 5 episodes to cover the entire history and development of what is called Shu. That's all for now. Thank you, everyone.